This is the House Study Committee on H.R. 806, Life Insurance Consumer Disclosures or Life Settlement. And I'm Carl Rogers, the chair of the committee. And we have several members of the House here, Representative Hughley, Representative Lumsden, and Representative Carson. And there may be some more coming in shortly. Representative Bentley's here. I met one of your constituents yesterday. Good. From Montezuma. Is that right? Okay, good. I wasn't in your area. So, anyway. All right, the purpose of this meeting today, this is the second. We've already had one meeting. Do not know yet when the third one will be. Like many of you, your calendars are booking up, so we'll have to look at a date and location. I kind of like being here. Here at the Capitol. We can move it somewhere else if y'all want to do that. I soon come here, and hopefully everybody can get here. Today, the purpose of the meeting was to hear from people. And Reagan, what I'm thinking about, I know you got to catch a flight. You want your person to go first, and I don't know who your person is.
We were thinking with the schedule, with the agenda today, maybe we could wait until the third meeting.
Okay, that's right. We did talk about that. So you can escape anytime you need to. So thank you. Anybody else got a deadline that they need to get out of here before we get finished with testimony? Okay, we'll go ahead and start. All right, what we were going to do is hear testimony from people that have a need for life settlement, and I know you should have an agenda in front of you, and we'll listen. If you'll come to the mic here, that way we can hear you, and also if you can make your remarks as brief as possible, the committee would appreciate it, and I know I would too. Ted Harada, you're an ALS patient and advocate, so Ted, if you'll tell us where you live and a little brief history about yourself, and for the record, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Again, my name is Ted Harada. I live in McDonough, Georgia. 4.5 years ago, I was diagnosed with ALS. I'm fortunate that I have a slow progression and also been a benefactor of some a clinical trial at Emory University. I happen to serve on the national board for the ALS Association as a trustee, and I'm a strong patient advocate for frankly all patients that are dealing with terminal illnesses. I'm a supporter of this policy, H.R. 806, for many reasons, not the least of which is a personal story. When I first was diagnosed, I didn't know if it was going to be fast-moving, slow-moving, what my progression would be. I reached out to, coincidentally, actually, someone from my insurance company happened to call. It was really more of a sales call. And I said, well, I'm not interested in that, but while I have you on the phone, I have a question for you. I said, I notice I have a death benefit rider on my life insurance, and how does that work? And he starts telling me, oh, well, if you have a terminal illness, and mine was, I think it was, you had to have a doctor's note from 12 months. And I just listened to it all and said, okay. Took it all in, wasn't sure where I was going to go with it. But the next day, my actual life insurance agent called me up and said, hey, that guy doesn't work for me. So whatever he told you, discount. Because he had told me, yeah, you may qualify, depending on what your doctor writes, et cetera, et cetera. And all of a sudden, I'm like, this is weird. Like, he's totally distancing himself. Like, do you understand me? That he doesn't represent me. He doesn't work for me. And I was like, what are you trying to hide? It really came across to me like, are you upset that he gave me information that I would be potentially eligible for this rider based on, my doctor's thoughts of progression? And someone that I had a good relationship all of a sudden was being curt, short, and really just standoffish. And it was, I thought that took me aback. And that was long before I had learned about all the different options for people with terminal illnesses. So that made me think, are they really looking out for my best interest? Now, fortunately, I didn't need to do anything with it because I do have slow progression. But what if I did need to do something with that? But I've dealt with many people being an advocate across this country. Some people get it diagnosed and they die in 6, 8, 12 months. And the saddest part when you see this happen is oftentimes they end up dying without dignity because they don't have the funds needed to get that power wheelchair to get out or to modify their home for what they need now to move around. They might need a new bathroom situation to take a shower, to bathe themselves. They might need a bidet put in just so that they can clean themselves after using a restroom. They might need a Hoyer lift put into their bedroom to help them get in and out of bed because their wife or child or parent, whoever's taking care of them, can't help them. And these things cost, an average patient can cost up, for an ALS patient annually can cost up to $250,000 a year in medical costs. $250,000 a year. Now, the way I look at this is not a handout. People are paying their life insurance policies. But you know what you do with a life insurance policy? You get it, you sign it, you pay your dues as they come up, and you kind of put it away and don't really know that much about it, and you think it's just a death benefit for your family. Very few people realize that there's a life benefit for people. Very few people recognize that they have the right and the option to utilize that clause if it's necessary, and no one's there to tell them. No one volunteered to me. You know, the one agent said, oh yeah, there is something you can do about it. But my real agent said he doesn't work for me. Whatever he told you, think about that. They're more than happy to keep us in the dark. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. All right? What else would we say we want to keep consumers in the dark about? So my ask to you is to recognize that all we're asking is to shine the light on the clauses that are out there for people to utilize. If they qualify, great. We don't want to change qualifications. The agents go into it open-minded, what qualifies a patient. The patient, you know, again, we do all have obligations as consumers to understand, but sometimes we don't understand. We're not asking to change what makes someone eligible. I don't think it's hard or wrong to ask that a consumer paying their dues each month, their premiums each month, has the right to know what they're paying for, has the right to understand how to utilize that benefit. So at the end of the day, I'm asking all of you to support this and do the right thing for all patients, all your constituents. It's the right thing to do. And I ask people that I've seen literally go broke, literally get evicted from their homes because they no longer could afford to make those payments. They had to choose between the medical bills and the house bill. And that choice, if they have a third option, shouldn't have to be made. So at the end of the day, what this would do for people is make sure they're educated about the option and know how to utilize it. We're not asking you to change or make it easier for someone to exercise that option. Just make sure they understand the option. I hope you'll strongly consider this, and at the end of the day, support this act and pass it because it's the right thing to do for your constituents. Thank you for your time today.
Any questions? I do have. When were you diagnosed with ALS?
I was actually diagnosed in 2011. I'm a atypical outlier. I've actually been part of a FDA trial at Emory University that was been peer reviewed and documented to help in medical journals. It was published, and it's helped me and really kind of frozen my progression. So I'm atypical. Most people die within 2 to 3 years. It's a very progressive disease, and quite frankly, part of the reason I'm here might be some survivor's guilt because I see people that have been diagnosed after me, same time as me, die over and over again. And before I learned about this, I saw many people, because they can't work anymore, quickly you can't work anymore, then the wife or the spouse or the child has to make a decision, well, do I work or do I stay at home and take care of my spouse? And I don't think those are decisions people have to make when they have options. It's just unfortunate that we don't have a process in place to make sure they're aware of their options.
So when you were diagnosed, what was your age?
I was 38 years old.
38 years old.
I was the same age as Lou Gehrig. Okay. So a lot of people think this is a elderly disease. I can tell you that's not true at all.
Are you able to work now? Are you still working?
Yeah, I'm able to work now.
Okay.
So again, I'm not here necessarily just for me. I'm here for people that
Sure.
don't have my blessings.
What has it cost you since you've been diagnosed?
In the beginning, quite frankly, in the beginning, before I took place in this trial, first of all, the medicine, if I didn't have insurance, would be $1,200 a month. Many people lose their insurance because they can't work. So that medicine alone is $1,200 a month just for something that might give you 3 or 4 months of extended life. I had purchased a van at one time because I was using a cane full time, and I was kind of afraid that in the next 6 to 12 months I'd be in a wheelchair prior to this clinical trial. That van, even used, was about $15,000, and that was, with 80,000 miles on it, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, I had needed a BiPAP machine because I was having some issues with my breathing, and that was another like $2,000. And again, some people, the cost can be a lot more because once you get in that wheelchair, I actually had one donated that I've donated all this stuff back, but I had one donated. A power wheelchair can cost easily $20,000. And many of these things, once you get them, there's ongoing cost of repair, upkeep, etc. And you'd be surprised how much of that stuff is not covered by Medicare or Medicaid specifically.
Right.
And a lot of times the people that need the most help are the ones that are most vulnerable. They don't have necessarily the benefits that some of us others are privileged to have. They might not have an additional disability contract, life insurance, not life insurance, but disability contract. So this impacts the people that can least afford to lose their jobs.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for the time.
Okay, next is Carrie Duffy with Emory ALS Center Coordinator.
I'm not as eloquent as Ted, so I wrote my stuff down.
Okay, good.
I'm Karen Duffy. I live in South Forsyth County, so my House Representative is Mike Dudgeon. I'm in that South Forsyth, Johns Creek area. I'm the director of Cure for ALS, which is a nonprofit organization with a mission to raise funds, support advocacy, and spread awareness for ALS. I'm here today on behalf of the Emory ALS Clinic and all ALS patients in Georgia. My story is unique in that I haven't had a family member that has had ALS. After watching a broadcast of the 2005 Ironman World Championship, my son, Brian, who was then a 12-year-old triathlete, was motivated to raise awareness and money to find a cure for ALS. He saw John Blaze, who was an age group triathlete, finish the endurance event just 5 months after being diagnosed with the disease. So Brian started what has now become a family mission to stop ALS. Because of Brian's persistence, our family hosts a road race in Cumming, Georgia, which is now in its 10th year, and we added a golf tournament 3 years ago. We met Dr. Jonathan Glass from the Emory ALS Center at an event in Atlanta in 2006, and after seeing the clinic and the laboratory, we chose to donate all the money that we raise to his team. As our family became more involved, I became more passionate about the cause and made myself available to volunteer at the Emory ALS Clinic. The more I volunteered, the more I met people living with ALS and a lot of people who have died from ALS. The more I did that, the more I wanted to be a part of that Emory team and help them give the best care possible to their patients. So I'm now the website manager and outreach coordinator as well as the volunteer coordinator. And I've come to know hundreds of patients and families like Ted's over the years, and I've listened to many stories of the challenges that they encounter. People with ALS oftentimes face huge hurdles with their health every single day. ALS takes away the ability to move, speak, swallow, and ultimately breathe. Whether it begins in the arms or legs or presents with changes in speech and breathing, each day they'll have obstacles of managing daily hygiene, moving, eating, and sleeping. More often than not, they must also face challenging financial obstacles as well every single day. It costs our patients a minimum of $10,000, and as Ted said, it could be as much as $250,000 if that patient has had a tracheostomy and needs, a lot more care. I've known many families who've lost their homes, filed bankruptcy because of the incredible financial strain that ALS poses. Understanding life insurance can be overwhelming for people under the best of circumstances, but it's absolutely crucial for people facing serious illness to have a clear understanding of all the benefits that are available to them in their policies. The Life Insurance Consumer Transparency and Disclosure Act would help ensure that not only ALS patients and caregivers, but those fighting any terminal illness or health challenges, but all Georgia citizens understand and utilize the benefits that they may qualify for, some that they don't even know that they have. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Joel Truss. And Joel, if you'll tell us who you are and what you do and where you live. You don't have to give us your street address, but
Oh, no. That way y'all know what to send all your election information. Now, my name is Joel Truss. I live in DeKalb County, and currently I work with the Advocacy Committee of the ALS Association. I previously worked as a legislative aide for the State Senate, and that's how I met Mr. Harada and the ALS Association and got involved with them. They impressed on me just the needs of the organization and for the patients of ALS. And as Mr. Harada said, while he's an outlier, the average case is 2 to 5 years life expectancy, and that impressed on me as someone who didn't have a terminally ill family member or friend to get involved and help where I can. And I believe this committee is the best way to address the issue, at least start addressing the issue. And like Ms. Duffy, I'm not quite so eloquent, so I also prepared a statement. The most important thing to remember here is money and time. Most families, when they find out about this diagnosis, it comes completely out of the blue. It's the most shocking thing in their life, and they are not prepared to deal with the emotional or the financial impact of dealing with a terminal illness. I've had the privilege of speaking to ALS patients as a member of the Advocacy Committee, and when we talk about receiving that diagnosis, they all say that every day after is both a miracle and a fight. And half of that fight is ensuring that they have the money for not only the medicine, but also the physical therapy and medical devices, such as wheelchairs and breathing machines, like Mr. Harada said. Most importantly for them is that their family is the ones that are fighting with them and living with them and helping as their bodies begin to shut down. Is that they don't have the financial burden of debt and dealing with the devices and everything after once they've passed on. And this is where life insurance, I believe, comes in. Last year, the Senate and the House both dealt with bills dealing with giving patients more information when it comes to their life insurance policies. This is the most straightforward, basic thing that we can do as a state to ensure that they have the financial resources they need for their families to alleviate their debt, not only to alleviate their debt, but also to help in their fight as they continue on and just take every day and live every day the best way they can. Actually, I kind of cut through some of this. Now, I know that this committee is dealing with that language right now and is studying that language. I urge you to adopt it. Again, there are issues that come before the Assembly. I know because I've been here and I've served in the Senate where you got to go through committee and you got to debate everything and spend a couple of hours doing that. Then you got to go into the House and do all of the debates there. Then vote it and go through that exact same process again. This is extraordinarily simple. This is just making sure that the life insurance companies give them the exact information on their policies and all the benefits that come with their policies before they decide to either allow that policy to lapse or to swap down for Medicaid, which doesn't carry all the same benefits of that as their life insurance policies. And really, that's all I have to say, and I appreciate your time in putting forward and studying this issue.
any questions from anybody or comments? Why don't you leave us a copy of your statement, and we'll make it part of the record. Ms. Duffy, if we can get a copy of your statement, part of yours too. Okay. Okay, next is Rob and Christy Estes.
Thank you for allowing us to be here today. Our House representative is our friend and neighbor, Lynn Smith. We're from Noonan, Georgia. In Noonan, we ran several businesses before Rob's diagnosis, and now we have started and run a nonprofit. Rob is involved in the Stephen Ministry program at our church, and we're active in our community. In some years, we invested in life insurance to protect ourselves. In August of 2013, Rob and our 2 children began an incredible journey. At that time, Rob was diagnosed with grade 4 glioblastoma brain cancer, which has a 12 to 15-month life expectancy. Rob is at 2 years, and so he, like Mr. Harada, is an outlier, and he is doing great. But as most life-threatening and terminal illnesses go, this brought with it the fact that he can no longer work. He does monthly chemotherapy, and that there's no end in sight for that. And it cost us the price for the medications is between $6,000 and $7,000 a month. So we took stock. Brain cancer is the most expensive cancer to treat. So we took stock of our resources, and it led us to asking questions about the living benefits of our life insurance policies. And unfortunately, I know how difficult this information can be to get. When we first inquired of our agent, we asked him if there was any disability insurance or what our living benefits were. His response to that was that we did not have disability insurance, and that if he could help us in any way, to just let him know. But he didn't offer to tell us what our living benefits were. And quite honestly, I don't know if he was educated about what our living benefits were. Second, we called insurance companies and asked them the same question, and we discovered that there was an accelerated death benefit feature on one of Rob's policies. To qualify, Rob would have to have 6 months or less life expectancy. After a 30-day process, they told us that he didn't qualify. Unfortunately, they failed to tell us of the other living benefits that we had on the policy. Fortunately, Rob met another insurance agent, and he shared his story with him. The agent shared that he could not actually help us, but he thought that Rob would qualify for a life settlement. He confided that his company would not let him talk about or assist with a life settlement. He was restrained from helping us. However, he was ethical enough to refer us to another agent that did not have this restriction. The last agent referred us to a life settlement company. This firm told us that our policies had disability premium waivers, and we were offered a life settlement. We have since received cash from 3 policies, and we are in the process of being approved for a waiver of premium on the remaining ones. Unfortunately, as we were transacting the life settlement, the carrier stonewalled us by increasing the time to complete their paperwork when they were told that it was for a life settlement. We also received a letter in the mail from the carrier about the disadvantages of life settlements. So we received that letter in the mail, but we didn't receive any letter in the mail from our carriers about our living benefits in our annual statements or otherwise. They also made the process more difficult by only mailing paperwork instead of sending it via fax or email. So we are the poster children for transparency legislation. We've seen a lack of simple, coherent, consumer-oriented information. We've seen misinformation or no information. There's apparent proactive lack of disclosure and transparency by insurers and their agents. Only by a good stroke of luck were we able to find out about our living benefits. Quite honestly, without the life settlements, we would already be in bankruptcy. Disclosure to consumers is desperately needed. It's wrong for consumers to have to go through what we did to find out what their living benefits are. And as the founders of a nonprofit that awards financial aid to other people facing medical crises, we know that this is a very broad problem and that consumers are not educated on their living benefits. We believe that the people of Georgia deserve to be told the truth about financial products that they have paid for, including life insurance.
Questions? Anybody? How old is Rob?
I'm now 43.
So you were diagnosed.
44.
When were you when were you diagnosed?
Diagnosed August 16th of 2013, shortly before my 41st birthday.
Okay.
42nd.
Okay. Question I have: how much money has it cost you since he's been diagnosed with this brain cancer?
Can you-
Before I was diagnosed, I was the owner of 3 different businesses. So I've sold one, dissolved another, and the other is a family business. So
Are you talking strictly medical cost?
Yeah, basically.
Um,
I guess living expenses too, since he's unable to work.
Pardon?
He's unable to work, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It's been in the tens of thousands. And
Okay.
that, we have the, that doesn't, that we have high deductibles for our insurance. So I can't tell you.
Okay.
Offhand, I can tell you.
How many children do y'all have?
We have 2.
2. What ages are they?
13, and she'll be 14 on Sunday, and 16.
Okay. Expensive time.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else? Let me ask this, and I guess this may be pointed. What life insurance companies were you dealing with?
Guardian,
Protective,
Protective.
Liberty. I had policies.
Okay.
He was overinsured, which was
I
a very
in lot of
fortunate
debt
thing.
with the businesses that I was running, and so I was probably overinsured for what I needed, which is
Fortunate.
for 41-year-old or 40, however old I was when this happened. It was great, and I've often said, cancer, believe it or not, saved my life. If it hadn't been for this diagnosis, there was no way that Christy and I would still be married. I was working all the time. I was missing my children's growing up, and so that is why when after the diagnosis, within a week of brain surgery, I'm sitting around the table with my accountants and Christy, and we're talking about all the things that we had in place. Some insurance policies that I felt like I had, didn't know quite where they were stuck away in drawers here and there, because I dealt with so many people with all these businesses, and I said I want to start a foundation because I want to help people that this is a mess, and we are very fortunate to have all these things in place, and at that time we didn't know anything about the life. All I was looking at was the debt, and how am I gonna saddle my family, worked all my life to build these businesses. Am I gonna saddle them with all this debt, or is there a way out? And fortunately, we found a way out, and God has been good, and my health continues to be good. And,
Okay. Well, thank y'all for being here. Thank you. If you'll leave a copy of the statement for the record, that would be appreciated. Okay, M. Brian Freeman, President of Habersham Funding, Atlanta. Turn that up a little bit.
I'm gonna have to compete with a lot out there, aren't I?
I don't know what they're beating on, but it's. Okay, Brian.
All right.
Let me ask you this. Is anybody from the insurance department here? Okay, tell me who you are.
Trey Sibley, I'm the Director of the Division of Insurance and Financial Oversight.
Okay. Are you new there?
Been there a while. I'm pinch hitting for since Jay left.
Jay, okay.
Actually, we had someone here.
Okay, good, thank you. All right, Brian.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak about this consumer transparency bill. This bill is vitally important, and I know that you believe so too. That's why we have a study committee. And so I want to thank you for looking at this issue and ask you to support this bill through passage. For the last 26 years of my 37-year life insurance career, I've specialized in living benefits. And what that means is that I've witnessed the confusion and lack of understanding about life insurance in thousands of individuals all across Georgia and the United States. In fact, many people abandon their life insurance policies without ever knowing that they were due benefits under them. Because unfortunately, the notion of life insurance for most people is that you have to die to collect. Now, over the last 26 years, we've seen policies from citizens in Georgia, from Adel to Bremen, to Cairo, to Lafayette, to Valdosta, to Athens, of course, Atlanta, and Albany, just to name a few places. And when people call, many, if not all, are confused about life insurance. Because, again, the notion of life insurance is all about a death benefit for most people. Now, beyond their cash value in some policies, virtually no consumers understand any of the other living benefits that are in them. Even structuring the use of cash value in policies confuses people, especially when you have 2 or 3 layers of cash value and how you get that out. And even more confusing is the misunderstanding or lack of understanding about how to stack benefits from policies. For example, if you're looking to triage your policy as a consumer or need help triaging your policy to see what all you can get and what's the maximum benefit and what you actually need, you might want to use some cash value, use an accelerated death benefit, and then do a life settlement if you qualify. So sometimes you qualify for all of those, and you might want to stack them to get maximum benefits. Unfortunately, as you've heard earlier, some insurance carriers have gone out of their way to keep information out of the hands of consumers and frequently to misinform. Consumers deserve to know what they've paid for, especially as this relates to agents. And if the folks get here, which they understand they're on the way, you'll hear testimony about this later. But it's a shame if agents are told that they can't speak about all living benefits. It causes them to commit malpractice, which I think is a pretty bad thing. Interestingly enough, the reason that this bill calls for direct disclosure to consumers under certain conditions is that north of 75% of people in the state of Georgia have no current active agent. Agents retire, agents change companies and have no access to the old policies. Agents die, of course. Agents get out of the business. And people move to Georgia from all over the place and leave their agent behind. And not to mention that now close to 50% of all life policies are sold on the internet. So carriers need to be able to, are required to disclose. Now, I know we gave the committee a list of 18 common living benefits and policies that are listed in the legislation. Some of these are in some policies. Other policies have, in fact, some policies have all of them. Some have fewer of these benefits in them, and then some policies even have other unique benefits that are not even listed. But in House Bill 193, what consumers need and want is really very simple. They just want to be allowed, given the tools, to understand what their benefits are. That's all this is about. In fact, I see a correlation between going to buy a car whether it's a Ford, a BMW, a Honda, a Chevrolet, Toyota, or whatever it is, when you buy that product, you get an owner's manual. And it tells you how everything works. Even a weed whacker, you go buy a weed whacker and you get an owner's manual. But life insurance doesn't have it. And as you know, even Philadelphia lawyers can read a life insurance policy and not know what all the options are. In fact, I get calls from them all the time. What does all this mean? And so we get the opportunity to educate folks no matter what they do for a living, because you got to know about these things. You got to be told about them. From the standpoint of agents, one more thing I'd like to say is, all agents want to be able to do too is to help their clients without retribution or restraint, as they're required to in their code of ethics. If you're a chartered life underwriter, you're a CFP, you're a chartered financial consultant, or any of these designations, in all those codes, you pledge to do for others what you would do for yourself, were you in the same condition. So we want them to be able to follow their code of ethics. Also, the expectation under the life license that's issued in the state of Georgia, I believe, is that people will tell the truth and tell all about their policies. It's one thing to sell somebody insurance. It's another, once somebody owns it and it's their property, not to give them all the information about it when they come to you and ask you. I think that's malpractice if you don't. I will tell you that there's been a slew. We all know what a slew in the South is, I think. But there's been a slew of white papers, articles, and even webinars written about life insurance recently and living benefits and the confusion of consumers. In fact, it's just almost, it's weekly. I get a new one of these. Ernst & Young and Deloitte came out with white papers this year, and they both agreed on this topic. They said that life insurance needs to be simplified. The products are not understood. Consumers, therefore, very confused. I would say, instead of necessarily having to simplify the products, is that you simplify the explanation of the products and make sure people get an explanation. As you've heard from these consumers and consumer advocates already, paying for medical is a problem. If people are terminally ill, paying for medical is a real problem. These high Obamacare premiums and co-pays are a problem. Long-term care, and one of the things that wasn't exactly said when the ALS folks were up here is that many folks, once they progress with ALS, have to have 24-hour care because they have a trach. And then that is when you get into the $100,000, $150,000 bill a year to take care of folks. And so for disability, to keep a roof over people's head, a car in the driveway so they can go to the doctor and do what they need to, or groceries on the table. And as we've heard in the first meeting, sometimes Medicaid even forces people to abandon their life insurance to get Medicaid benefits. In speaking to agent groups all over Georgia about this bill, which we've done for nearly a year now, I've always asked the agents one thing, and the one thing I ask them is, do any of you in this room have one client? You don't. All I'm asking is one, not two, not 10, but one client who understands how to use their life insurance to receive living benefits through all phases of their life. Now, you have to understand, I speak a lot. I'm out there. I'm out and about. We see lots of people. We see lots of agents. Nobody raises their hand because nobody has not one client that understands how to use their life insurance. Now, I want to cover something because, and I'm sorry to say this, because for nearly 40 years, I've made my business in the life insurance business, and I love life insurance companies. Though it may not sound that way, I just want to preface it to say I love life insurance companies. They've been good to me. It's been a good business. But I'm sorry to say that I think that some of these fine carriers that may be in the room today or represented in the room today, they're going to say being transparent is going to cost us too much. It's a burden. And I'll tell you, I don't know how many of you own mutual funds, and I brought some of this with me just to illustrate, but if you own a $20 share of a mutual fund, you get this big book every year. Just one share now. You don't have to own more than one. And then every quarter you get this. They can afford to send it to you. And it's not a big burden. They disclose everything. 6 states already require disclosure of these benefits, so the systems are set. The companies have it ready to go. And I'll tell you another thing, that because they, under this bill, they would it'd be clear that agents can help their clients without restriction. It'd take them the resources and the money they now spend trying to keep that from happening. It'll do away with that, and so they can spend that somewhere else that'll actually help them. They also may say that we're asking them to advertise a life settlement business. I'll tell you, I foresee, if you look at those 18 benefits, I foresee that 95 to 98% of the benefits going to come in knowing about all those other things, and 2 to 3, maximum 5% to life settlement, because most people don't qualify for a life settlement. So when we see folks out there with their policies that are banning their policies, it's not about life settlement. It's about all these living benefits. And also, you know, life settlement really is a benefit under the policy because it's a way of using the assignment clause for value. One of many ways. There's many ways to use the assignment clause. You can give a policy away, sell it to your kids. If you own it in a business, sell it to a kid. A lot of people do this all the time. And, of course, sell to a third party like a life settlement company. In 2005, this legislature passed a bill to regulate life settlements. So we've been regulated here for 10 years. Also, you might hear that it'll cause premiums to go up for everybody. Well, interestingly enough, there have been 2 studies, one by Mass Mutual and the University of Connecticut, that say that's not so. And the Society of Actuaries has also done a study on the topic that say that's not so. I understand that some people have wondered and just to speak to life settlement a minute, some people have wondered where the policies go when companies like mine and others. By the way, there are 23 licensed life settlement companies in the state of Georgia as of today, because we pulled it off the website and counted them. Where do these policies go? Well, we've been fortunate enough in my years in this business to actually sell policies to life insurance companies' investment departments. Warren Buffett's General Re owns a boatload of them and just bought more. Wilton Re owns policies. AIG, of course, has been the biggest owner of policies. Genworth, the Aegon of Transamerica has bought policies. Symetra's bought policies. And I could keep going. There's a lot of even Phoenix got into business for a while. Pension plans buy policies. They're searching for return, of course, like everybody in this economy. And you'll find that Canadian pension plans own policies. CalPERS, with $291 billion to invest, owns policies. Pennsylvania firefighters pension fund, and on it goes, including some private equity and hedge fund structures. Very few of those are into business because most of them need something that's liquid, but 1 or 2 are. And so I wanted to make sure you understood that the kind of folks that are investing in life settlements are the kind of folks you'd want to see investing in life settlements, so that we answer that question. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I could sit here for hours and talk about this, given the quarter of a century we've been working with living benefits. but I won't do that. And I will say I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you.
Okay, Representative Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Freeman, I appreciate your coming before and giving your testimony. Can I ask exactly what does Habersham Funding do? I know you purchase these policies from people, I presume, that are terminally ill, chronically ill, and so forth. Can you give us a little bit of insight as to how you run your business? How do people get referred to you? And if they have more specifically, if they have, say, $1 million policy, whether it be whole or term or what have you, how much do you offer them for the benefits from that policy? Is it 100,000, 800,000? Just how do you get your business, and how do you value the policy, and what kind of discount do you give to the policyholder? Okay,
so we're a nationwide company that's based here in Atlanta. This is the second company that I've owned and managed in this space. This company was started in 2001 as a licensed buyer. It's called life settlement provider in the law, but it's what it amounts to is a licensed buyer. We're licensed in 46 states to do business. There are one or two that don't regulate, more than one or two, a handful that don't regulate the industry, but most do. We get our business mainly by referral from lawyers, accountants, and financial planners and life insurance agents. Unfortunately, it'd be a lot more referrals from life insurance agents if they weren't afraid to do so, but nevertheless that's the case. So it's a fairly complicated way that we value the policies. In fact, I'd invite anybody that wants to see it to come on out to our office in Buckhead, and you're welcome to sit with we've got very smart analysts that go through all these policies, dig through them, find all the benefits, read them. We're professional readers and understanders, managers, buyers of policies, of portfolios of policies. And so the down and dirty way of saying what we do is the longer your life expectancy and the longer we got to pay premiums and have money out, the smaller amount you get. The shorter your life expectancy, the more you get. So if you, for example, we do buy policies from people who are terminally ill, but we also, of any age, they could be 40 or 35 or 70 and be terminally ill. Or we also buy policies of seniors who no longer want or need, for whatever reason, their policy, and they don't have to be terminally ill. They could be just have a shortened life expectancy because of their age and some geriatric illness, if you will. And so we could buy, in some cases, out to 12, 13, 14 years life expectancy. When you do that, and the person is a senior, and their premiums are high, especially on universal life policies as they go up, of course, they would get a smaller amount. On the other hand, if you've got someone who is terminally ill that has a very short life expectancy, you could see 75%, and maybe even more, depending on the premiums underlying the policy. But typically, you're seeing anywhere from 8, 10, it's the very lowest if somebody's life expectancy is way long, all the way up to around 75% for the policy. Did I answer everything?
Those percentages again, you purchasing against not the cash surrender value, but you're purchasing against the policy amount.
Yes.
And that percentage that you're paying could be anywhere from 10 to 75%. Depending on life expectancy, various other factors.
And premium, yeah.
Sure.
Premium burden on the policy.
Okay. Is that all your questions, Representative Carson? Representative Hughley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you speak to the 6 states that already have the disclosure requirements and what has happened to premiums and all of the other things that we've been told this morning are the results here in Georgia? How those issues have been handled in those 6 states?
I know of nothing negative that's happened in any of those states about premiums or policies or anything else for that matter that have to do with this issue.
And what are those states?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I knew I should have had that. Let's see. I know Washington, I believe Oregon, Vermont, and there's 3 more, and I can't remember the other 3. But I can get you that information.
Do you know how long they've had the disclosure?
A few years now. It's been, in fact, the last state to enact this has been 4 or 5 years. It's been a while. There's been long enough opportunity to sort it out and understand if there's any problems, and to my understanding there's not any. You're welcome.
Okay, Representative Carlson has another question.
I just wanted to give a follow-up to my colleague. I was handed some information from someone in industry. I wanted to run it by you, Mr. Chairman. This is the exact states that have the insurer disclosure mandates in law. And Carolyn, it doesn't have when those mandates were put into effect, but it does have the states and what those requirements were. Mr. Chairman, did you want to?
That'd be nice.
Yeah. I have one copy for myself, and obviously we have it electronically, or I do, and I can have my admin sit it around. So that wasn't as much of a comment or a question as much as it was addressing your question.
I will tell you that INCOIL drafted a model for disclosure, and an interesting side note is that our current insurance commissioner, Ralph Hudgens, was the chairman of that committee that drafted the INCOIL model that's been passed in those states when he was still in the Senate.
These states, Mr. Chairman, that have these mandates are California, Oregon, Washington, Kentucky, Maine, New Hampshire, and Wisconsin. Does that sound correct, Mr. Freeman?
Sounds like that's about right. I'll double check when I get back, but I'm sure you know because for that information.
It does have information to your point about the INCOIL recommended legislation.
Brian, let me ask questions if I could. On the handout living benefits that we're proposing in House Bill 193 and Senate Bill 136, what you're saying is if an insured had bought these benefits.
Well, yeah. Well, for example, yes, if a policy, like if they bought whole life or if they bought a universal life or some sort of a variable life insurance policy that had cash value, of course, those would have that. But if they bought term, it wouldn't be in those. That cash value wouldn't necessarily be in those policies unless it was some modified kind of term product that had, say, a return of premium feature that would pay out over at a certain period.
Okay, number one, the accelerated death benefit would be included in most of the policies, correct?
Most policies nowadays, that is automatically added to the policy.
Yeah. Waiver of premium used to be an option.
It still is in most policies.
But we're not mandating they waive the premium, or are we?
Oh, no.
We're just disclosing to the insured
to look for
what coverages they have.
Okay. Yes, sir.
The nursing home benefit is not included, correct?
So it depends. You know, one of the types of articles that are just I get so many e-newsletters. It just hits my box every day. In virtually all of them, they're talking about the trend is for policies to offer some kind of living benefit inside the policy, like nursing home or critical illness or other long-term care benefits. It's sort of the hottest, newest thing on the market.
Okay. So all we're talking about is is a disclosure to the named insurer of what coverages they have.
That's right.
So we're
all
not
we're talking
mandating or making a life company put waiver premium or any other mandated coverage on here that they didn't purchase in the beginning.
That is correct.
Okay. I thought that was right. I wanted to make sure. Okay, any other questions? Sure.
As I look at this and I see different states are slightly different in the way they do the disclosures. Some, if the person is 60 and or has a terminal or chronic illness, they have to be notified. And others, if the insurer knows that the person is chronically or terminally ill, they have to be notified based on the Department of Insurance standard form. Is that how most of them do it?
It is, and I mean, as you know, from state to state, sometimes they modify the legislation or even the models a little bit. But that's correct. That's and in fact, in HB 193, there is would be a department standardized form that would be used, so the carriers wouldn't have to come up with a form. It would be one that the department puts together, and all carriers that own policies in Georgia would use it.
So typically does the insurance company would not necessarily know that somebody's chronically ill. Is there a form or process that they give notice to the insurance carrier of the terminal illness?
Well, as you've already heard from Mr. and Ms. Estes, that without calling, they wouldn't have known, the carrier wouldn't have known it. Unfortunately, they didn't get too good of results even by telling them. But there is really not a process, because most people don't even think to call their life insurance company, because, again, they think it's a death benefit, not a living benefit. And so, you know, one thing that would solve this is if the carriers just had to notify everybody every year, so that everybody that bought a policy knew it.
Well, from looking at this, it looks like the notice is going out when a policy lapses. Then the notice goes out to let people know what options they have. It's what I just saw this a minute ago, but that looks like what they're doing. And the problem as I see it is, when at the time a person buys a policy, there are so many forms and notices. Even if given at that time, it will not necessarily increase or improve a person's knowledge. So it would make more sense to do it like this. When a policy lapses, that's an indicator that a person is having a problem or concern or whatever. If that notice goes out at that time, as opposed to doing a blanket every year notice to people, but you know, different states seem to be doing it a little bit differently. But just sending a notice on top of the other required notices that people get when they buy policies, there has to be some, in my mind, some other trigger to make sure that people actually look at it, because a lot of times people get so many notices and notes from insurance companies that they don't really look at them. So it has to be some means of making people look at it as opposed to just putting it in with other notices, in my opinion.
Representative, I can't tell you how many people have called us up. They found out that they had some living benefit options in their policy, call us up after they've lapsed it and said, what can we do? And of course, they're very disappointed, because some of them have walked away from tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars because they didn't know.
That's why I'm saying if it goes with a notice, because before your policy lapses, you're going to get a notice that your policy is about to lapse. And so if the notice goes out at that time, these are your options, these are things that you can do, in my mind, it was more effective notice as opposed to putting it in with all the other notices you get at the time of purchase.
Yeah, the problem is that, you know, a lot of times these policies are not used till 30 years later. And sometimes it's not even the person that bought it that's looking at it. It's their children. When they're trying to put them in a nursing home, it's trying to figure it all out. They don't have any idea what they have. And if we don't tell them, if the carriers don't tell them, if the agents are not allowed to tell them, who's going to tell them? I mean, it's a big problem. See it, and you know, unfortunately, from my vantage point, we see this every day. It's heartbreaking.
Any other questions? I was going to say, Representative Hughley, and it's like selling car insurance or home insurance. People don't read the policy until there's a claim, and you know, a lot of times they are surprised. Same way on the commercial side as well. In fact, I need to go through all my life insurance policies since we started all this. So, Brian, let me go back to the life settlement now. What are you able to do as far as life settlement today? When the commissioner was a state senator, what model did he put in place, the NCORP model? Yeah. And just briefly tell us what we did at that time.
So the first version of the bill that then Senator Hudgens carried was carried in this 2005 session and it went into effect at the end of 2005. It was a NAIC version. And then when the NCORP came out and he sat on the committee to draft the NCORP version. When it came out, he then, a couple of years later, put in another version that was the NCORP version and passed it. So that is the one that is currently in use in Georgia. What we can do in Georgia is, and what we do every day, is to go through people's policies with them. You know, tell them what they got and what can be done. So we're sometimes we direct those people back to, and I think there's somebody in the audience who could tell you that, look, we don't want to buy your policy now. You don't need to sell it now. Wait, and if you ever need to sell it, you would benefit more later. But so sometimes people need to do nothing but keep their policies. Sometimes they need to get some of the 18 living benefits that are in the policy besides life settlement, and sometimes life settlement needs to be in the mix of what they're doing, or sometimes it's the only thing that they can qualify for. So what we do is we contract with people who want to do a life settlement, need to do a life settlement, to buy their policy. What that means is that we're going to become, through a process of putting money in escrowing the documents, the change of ownership and beneficiary, and then sending them to the insurance carrier. Once those come back and we're named the owner of the policy, escrow breaks just like it does in a real estate transaction and pays those people the money that they've negotiated to have. The price that's been offered. And once that happens, then we become the owner and beneficiary and have to pay, of course, premiums, keep up with the policy, and keep paying premiums until there is a death. And then, of course, we use that money to reinvest, buying more policies. And that's simply how it works. A lot more complex than that in actuality, but that's simply how it works.
So that's the posture we're in now as far as code is concerned. So
that is exactly the posture we're in now. Now, I will say you have to have a license to do this. You know, and getting a license to be a licensed buyer is it's a little bit more exhaustive process than others. And there are also the other part of the process we're in that I didn't think to tell you till you just said something that reminded me, is that life insurance agents in Georgia, by virtue of their life license, are automatically life settlement brokers. Now, to go through all there's not really any hoops. You just fill out a form and tell the department you're going to be a life settlement broker, but you're allowed to by virtue of your life license. And this is one of the problems that I've got with the posture of some carriers, is that they're telling people not to do what Georgia's already, their license allows them to do, and to do the right thing by their client. So I think that's a problem.
Okay. I don't see any other questions, so thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Can you leave us a copy of it for the record?
I will. I've got a lot of notes on it, so I'll type it up and send it back to you.
Send it to Craig if you would, or
sure.
Jan.
Absolutely.
Okay, next is Jim Metters, owner, NIB Insurance, Marietta.
He's not here.
He's not here, okay. Ray Cranman. And Ray's a life insurance broker in Marietta.
Hi, it's Roy Cranman.
Oh, Roy, I'm sorry.
No worries.
I see it now.
I'm not sure what the procedure is, but maybe I should just share with you my experience. Is that, and perhaps
Sure.
you can ask questions. I've been in the insurance business for 38 years, and got a degree in risk.
I can't hear you even behind.
Okay, sorry about that. My name is Roy Cranman. I've been in the insurance business, I believe, 38 years, and I have a degree in risk management and insurance, and probably one of the few people you'll meet that actually majored, I guess they would call it a certificate program today, but at Georgia, when I was there in the risk management department, they had a track for life insurance, employee benefits, and estate planning, and that's what I did. So I've been doing it ever since, and today I'm in more of a wholesale role where I don't deal directly, generally I don't deal directly with clients on a retail basis. I deal with advisors, most of which are in financial institutions, which gives me kind of a unique perspective on this in that virtually every financial institution that I work in prohibits the discussion or even the mention or the sale or the execution of a life settlement transaction. And the problems it creates are really, in my view, substantial and frankly not in the best interest of the client. A recent case in point, a lady in her 60s, recently married to a new husband shortly after, within months after their marriage. He had a massive stroke, and he has been in care for about 5 years, and his situation has deteriorated rapidly. He had a group life insurance product with an increasing monthly premium. It's like a term policy, essentially. And she's been paying on it, and she's the sole caretaker. They had barely known each other, and now she's years and years into this caretaking situation. She works with a financial advisor with a large major financial institution whose brand or signs are on almost every street corner. And it was clear that given his condition, his deteriorating and ongoing condition, and the escalating premiums, which are now, I think they're $600-700 a month to keep this policy in place, and it's just too much for her. And she's also not only spent her time and effort taking care of him on a daily basis, even in the nursing home, she's spent a lot of her own money, and she's been paying these premiums as well. But she's gotten to a point where she couldn't do it anymore. We, contrary to this financial institution's rules, we had a discussion about it, and the only way that I could have a discussion with her without the advisor being involved, because they are strictly prohibited from having even just discussing it or mentioning it as an option, is I just had to suggest to her that she have a conversation with her CPA about the merits of it, and if she had an interest in pursuing it, to have her CPA call me, because I'm an independent, but I couldn't have a referral from the financial advisor because that would have broken the rules of engagement for me in the firm, as well as her making the referral. So ultimately we did do that, but we had to go around our elbow to get to our fanny in that process, and it was a very uncomfortable process. Subsequently, once we got the case going forward, my broker-dealer said that, well, this particular firm you're working with is not approved by our firm, and we're not inclined to approve another firm to do this business with, when in fact it's, my broker-dealer is a securities firm. There's no security law that says that they should or can preclude me from doing it. It's just a function of working with my broker-dealer. So then I had the challenge of having to help this lady without getting paid, because I wasn't going to get paid on it because my broker-dealer refused to work with the life settlement provider. Ultimately, after all of these shenanigans, this lady began to have concerns about the whole process that she should never have had to go through, because everything that we were doing was trying to help her, and it was a legitimate thing. She ultimately decided to reduce the face amount of the insurance in half and pay half the premiums, which really was not a satisfactory result either for her, because it's just going to escalate, and it's the same problem, it's just half as big. So it was overall a pretty ugly process, and I think it's one that should be, and I just don't think that clients need to be subjected to that, and advisors need to be prevented from providing legitimate advice to their clients.
Any questions for the witness? Okay. Thank you for, okay. Representative Carson.
So, do I understand you correctly? Well, actually I don't. So, are you speaking in favor of the legislation or against the legislation?
Well, I'm speaking, I don't know what the bill says, so what I'm speaking in favor of is allowing people to, opening the market so that people can have a discussion without these rules, these arbitrary rules by financial institutions, broker-dealers, life insurance companies that preclude advisors from being able to talk freely and advise clients in an appropriate way. So I don't know whether the bill for or against, I don't know how the bill is written. So,
as I understand it, it's state law requiring disclosure of a potential beneficiary's options, but you're not necessarily speaking toward that. You're speaking toward a captive, for example, a captive agent should not be precluded from telling of an insured parties of their potential options.
Not only a captive agent, but a captive financial advisor. If you have somebody who is not even a licensed insurance agent, working for a FINRA regulated organization and sees that this is an option for that client, their broker-dealer, their FINRA registered broker-dealer can preclude them and not allow them to make a referral to a licensed agent, and just can't even have a discussion about it. I mean, imagine not being able to have a discussion about, and I'm speaking purely about the issue of life settlements. There are, other factors and other settlement options available within a life insurance policy, but this conversation, my testimony is related to that.
How would state law trump FINRA professional guidelines? FINRA would prevent, in some cases,
FINRA doesn't prevent anybody from having the conversation. It's the broker-dealers who have chosen, because of their power granted to them by FINRA to tell an advisor, you're a registered rep with us, and therefore, according to our rules, not FINRA's, you can't have this conversation. So there's no FINRA regulation, to my knowledge, that prevents them from having the conversation.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? Okay. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for having me.
Scott Page, the Lifeline Program. Scott, why don't you tell us where you live, no street address, and
Yes, sir. My name is Scott Page. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I own the Lifeline program. I've been in the living benefits business as well for almost 26 years. And my history started with, it was a response primarily to help people who are dying of AIDS get the medicine and the living expenses they need through converting their life insurance policy into living benefits. We have since moved much more on a national level. For example, Betty White has been our spokesperson for 11 years. That's our consumer-facing program with Betty. And through her activities, we receive a lot of phone calls from consumers. And the majority of them are riddled with confusion. They don't understand their life insurance policies. They don't understand the benefits. They are, when we ask them with the consumer, have they spoken with their advisor? A large majority of them say, I've asked and my agent has told me they can't talk to me about the benefits within my own policy. We did some research with one particular carrier, which I will mention is New York Life. And we started getting lots of calls from New York Life consumers, and taking all that information and data, we captured it, and then I went to New York Life and worked my way up to their lead counsel. And I said, we are getting calls from your policyholders who are telling us that their agent cannot speak to them about living benefits, particularly any benefits within the policies, specifically that of a life settlement. And first the result was, well, we have a position to where we will not allow our agents to discuss life settlement specifically. I said, what about explaining other options within the policies? I am a life settlement provider. I'm licensed here in the state of Georgia. Under the statutes, we are required to read a consumer's policy and explain to them all of the benefits within the policy before we can move forward with a life settlement transaction. So the life insurance companies shifted that burden onto us as a young industry without expensive lobbyists to go around and fight for our rights. And now what we're asking for is for the insurance carriers to simply make those disclosures. And earlier you had mentioned about the disclosures being made at the time of the policy issues. When a policy is issued, you do get a stack of forms, and you get an insurance policy and a contract, which is really difficult to read. I would urge anyone here to pick up an insurance policy and read it. And if you can adequately understand all the benefits within it, you should win an award because it's really complicated and confusing on purpose. Insurance companies hold themselves out as being pro-consumer. You know, they spend lots of money on branding, lots of money on advertising. You know, we put life into life insurance, and we add IF, and you can look at MetLife, all these big companies. Yet, have you ever tried to call a consumer hotline or a consumer servicer of a life insurance company? You're put on hold and made listen to agonizing music. You could be on hold for minutes, sometimes 15, 20, 30, 45 minutes to get a customer service rep who really won't help you at all. What they will and are very, very good at is sending you a premium notice and sending you lap notices and grace notices. And earlier with your disclosure, we're asking that the disclosure under this bill be made for anyone over the age of 60. And we've heard lots of talk about specifically people suffering from terminal illnesses. And I've seen it firsthand. We've helped thousands of individuals in America. We've helped hundreds of people in Georgia and put hundreds of thousands of dollars in consumers' hands. And those dollars have stimulated the economy. They've paid for health care. They've made a difference between life and death. And the only way that that's happened is by consumers finding out on their own. Consumers being proactive through education, calling life settlement companies, calling living benefit companies, looking through the internet, reading papers, going to advocacy groups. And none of that has been with any support at all from the life insurance carriers. And life insurance carriers makes millions and millions and millions and billions of dollars. You know, you've never seen in the economy a life insurance company having to lay off massive people or at least part of their buildings back. You know, they're continuing to grow because it's a profitable company. And I would challenge any opposition to explain to me how a policyholder or a consumer is not better off by understanding all of their options. In many cases, a life settlement is a small portion of the options available. Specifically, not everyone's going to qualify for a life settlement. As Brian Freeman explained, the pricing is very difficult. It's cumbersome. Every policy is different. We have to be the policy experts. There's cost of capital. You know, we deal with different financing sources. One of my clients is one of the largest pension funds in the world that purchases these policies. There's a demand. There's a demand from institutional capital wanting to put money in the hands of consumers through these types of transactions. And we're being blocked because of insurance companies. I've spoken, as earlier they were talking about broker-dealers. I've gotten to compliance departments at broker-dealers, and they have just a flat-out, no, we don't discuss living benefits or life settlements. The same as New York Life had. But by the time I was able to get to their lead counsel, they will not put it in writing, but he told me that they will allow their agents to discuss life settlements. I think a lot of this is just confusion over what life settlements really are. I think that the insurance companies looked at life settlement companies as a threat, that we're going to affect their 85% lapse rate, that we're going to keep policies in force, but we're such a small percentage of those policies that there's never been an effective study by an insurance company to show that life settlements have had any negative impact on their business or the amount of profit that they have. I believe that if we can empower Georgia consumers, that we have an opportunity to get it right, specifically with the disclosure. By having a form that's developed by the department, triggered by sending out, whether they're age 65, whether they apply for a living benefit, whether they contact the carrier and ask a question about benefits, whether the policy is going into grace. By the time they send out a lapse notice, it's too late. I can also explain, many times we've received calls from consumers who's received lapse notices in their policies, and it's too late. What the carrier is very good at is canceling that policy the minute that the premiums run out. There's no second look. You know, the carrier sent out a notice that your policy is going to lapse in 60 days. If you don't get a premium in by that deadline, there's no reinstating the policy. And you've lost hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands of dollars, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the size of the premium and the face amount of the policy. Life settlements are not just for terminally ill. They become an active retirement planning option for seniors, specifically here in the state of Georgia. Anyone over the age of 60 should know that there's an option called a life settlement in their insurance policy, along with any other living benefits that are available. We've helped seniors that have life expectancies. Our company goes out to 15, 18 years of life expectancies. We put money in seniors' hands to help them live the remainder of their life and stimulate the economy. So it's very hard for me to understand when insurance carriers talk about how this is going to be a burden for them. When I've spent my career fighting with insurance companies to try to do what's right and what's fair. And again, I would challenge anyone representative from the insurance industry or someone who's on the other side of this bill to explain to me or the consumers in this room or the consumers in the state of Georgia how a disclosure statement explaining a benefit that's legally available in a regulated transaction is bad. Who is it bad for? Certainly not the consumers.
Okay, any questions? Okay, have you got any written testimony for the record?
I don't, but I will type it up and
Okay.
get it to you as well.
That'd be fine. Thank you for being here. All right, Marie Goolsby, Funeral Director of Goolsby Mortuary and Chairman of the Georgia Funeral Service Practitioners Association.
Thank you so much. Chairman.
Tell us where you live.
Okay, I live here in Atlanta, Georgia, in Fulton County. Our business is also located in Atlanta, in the city of Atlanta. And I was invited here by Representative Patty Bentley, District 139. I am a funeral director here in Georgia, and we are impacted about insurance at the end of life when families are coming in to get that death benefit that is due to them at the end of life. And this money a lot of times is used because they have to bury their loved one. And being able to verify that this person has insurance that will cover the cost of the services are very difficult. Here we have families that have loved ones who have suffered from terminal illnesses. It's been a long struggle, and here we are at the end of life, and we can't get the policies verified in a timely manner, especially if it's a group policy. They will tell you anywhere from 7 to 10 days, and then they won't even release information to us. It's information that has to be mailed to the beneficiary. And with some of the regular life insurance policies, they tell us also it can take anywhere from 3 to 10 days to receive information. Here's a loved one that we have to go back and tell that we can't accept the insurance without a verification. And unfortunately, people don't have money where they could just pen a check and pay for a service. Funeral service has increased over the years, as well as the services of cemeteries. And people depend on being able to get that death benefit at the end. And it shouldn't torment the family anymore just because the insurance company won't verify it. Now, we're not asking them to be paid in 10 days or 7 days. All we're asking is for verification that the insurance does exist, the insurance is in force, who's the named beneficiary. We give them a dollar amount, and will it be covered? It shouldn't take 7 to 10 days to receive that information. So we're here because we're never really included a lot of bills that take place that affect us as well. So I just wanted to get my word heard, and I wanted to talk for those families who I'm trying to console at a difficult time that don't have a way to pay but do have insurance, but we can't find out information that they won't disclose to us nor the family members in a lot of cases.
Okay, any questions? Sure.
So are you suggesting that we somehow put a timely disclosure requirement, and what does that look like, and what states already do it?
Well, I know that I believe we have one state that does it, and I'm believing it's the state of South Carolina, that it gives insurance companies 72 hours to disclose that information. Whether that's being enforced and it's working for that state, I really don't know. But it needs to be a process that is put in place so that we can at least verify what's happening and be able to tell our families that we can bury their loved one, and it's not going to take 10, 11, 12, 13 days for them to have a service.
Help me understand, what carriers, what insurance companies are you referring to?
Oh, well, I use Guardian Life, AIG, Independent, which is now AIG. It has been a lot of small insurance companies that have brought policies, and they now large insurance company, and research has to be done. So I get insurance policies from all kind of companies, Minnesota Life. If it's out there, we've probably received it.
What pre-need carrier do you use?
Guardian Life is a pre-need carrier. Atlanta Life was, but now they've sold out to NGL, so now it's through NGL. Unfortunately, people do not understand life insurance. They look at life insurance as something that they need when someone passes away. So I've learned a lot in here today, just learning about the life benefits from the conversations that have taken place. But when it's time for a family to be able to use that life insurance, it shouldn't be a difficult process because they're already going through a difficult process, and we can't bury their loved ones.
Okay. But there is most of them have an accelerated death benefit already on them, so if you could get to the families before that.
Well, we try to educate the consumers as well.
Right.
Well, one of the things, death is still taboo. People really don't want to talk about death. We'll talk about living, but people find it hard to plan and talk about death.
Right. That is a good point. Okay. All right, Representative Bentley, do you want to say anything? You normally do. You want to say anything?
Ooh, Patty.
That was
Thank you.
that was a compliment.
I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mrs. Goolsby, for accepting the invitation to be here to share, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing her to make those comments. And just to really just add on to what Mrs. Goolsby mentioned, we've heard testimony today about families being sick and different illnesses that they having to deal with, and the financial burden it places on their families. So oftentimes they utilize all of their funds during the period of sickness, but when when the other time come forward and they are sitting before funeral directors making plans, it makes it so difficult for us to move forward on finalizing the service when we cannot verify the benefits. So if there's something that could be added into this bill, or just to recognize that there is a issue from the funeral industry side, that would be very important. So, but again, I just thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving us an opportunity to share this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Brad Carver, do you want to say something, I think? Sorry, I missed you a while ago.
That's all right. That's all right. Brad Carver, Hall Booth Smith. I'm here on behalf of NAFA Georgia, National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the study committee here, and thank you for everything, members of the committee, that y'all are doing to work on this. We are hopeful as NAFA Georgia that a solution can come about based on this legislation, one that works for everybody. We will say that we are very supportive of House Bill 193. At the end of the day, our agents all across Georgia, what their concern is to make sure that they can openly and transparently talk to their clients and give them the best options that are available. And so that is why, frankly, NAFA Georgia feels very strongly about this. In your packets, you will see a lot of letters from all of our chapters from all around the state talking about this issue and talking about why their individual chapters feel very strongly that this is a good idea. At the end of the day, we want to protect the consumers. Our agents' clients want to do what's best for their clients and their families, and so that's why these disclosures are so important. And so I just wanted to come here today and to state that on behalf of all of our agents from around the state, we do support this legislation. At the end of the day, we know there's going to be a new version that comes out of this study committee, and we are hopeful that any issues can be worked out, because we do want something that is a compromise that works for everybody, but we do feel disclosure is important.
Okay. Any questions? I see none, so thank you, Brad, for being here.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask the insurance department to come up here. I know you're playing substitute, and
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Tell us your name again. I'm sorry.
It's Trey Sibley.
Okay, Trey.
SIV is in Victor, LEY. I'm the director of the Division of Insurance and Financial Oversight, and I'm here to do the best I can to sub for Jay, who's left us recently. So,
who's going to replace Jay?
Not sure, but you know, it's a big loss that Jay left us, but I'm sure he'll do good work over here.
Okay. Do you have anything you want to tell us about what we're doing? Any position or?
We don't have an official position, but we're certainly listening, and I will report back to the commissioner what was said here today, and at some point down the line, I'm sure the commissioner will weigh in.
Okay. All right. Thank you for being here. Anybody got some questions? You certainly may.
So what happens if a consumer contacts you and say that they're having a problem? For example, some of the things that we've heard today, what do you all do if they were to contact you?
We have a consumer services division, which has people who have particular expertise, including the benefits available with a life insurance policy. And so if there are specific questions around what's in the policy, what benefits are available, that is, we have people in the department who can answer those questions. Sometimes people are not familiar with that we do have the Consumer Services Division. We try to advertise that as much as possible. And if you go to our website, it's pretty easy to find the Consumer Services tab. But it is a good resource, and certainly encouraging constituents to use it. And so far as they have questions, please do so. I think it would be helpful in many of the instances I heard earlier. I'm sure we would have been able to answer some of the questions and been at least somewhat helpful.
Okay, anybody else? I do have a question. I had brought a constituent, well, we ended up not meeting because of the snow this past year, but what is in the code section, how long does the department or life insurance company or an annuity contract, how long does that company or the department maintain a copy of a contract?
I'm going off memory, so please don't hold it against me, but I believe that the record retention on the insurance policies is 10 years, I'd have to say.
I thought the code was longer than that.
I'm not, I think the record, I'll have to come back with you. It'd either be in Chapter 25 or Chapter 29. Those are the group life insurance and individual life insurance.
Okay.
I can double check that and report back to the.
If you do that at our next meeting, that'd be nice to know.
Sure.
I think Ms. Whitten, you and I looked up that code section, but I can't remember them. We had an issue with an annuity contract, and a company had sold 2 or 3 times, and then there was no trail, no copy. And I think the department was using a shorter period than the code section required it to be. So,
I think in more contemporary filings, effectively we keep them forever. I mean, it's electronically kept, and so those many of the policies, life policies, will be filed through SURF or IIPRC, which is a national compact. So the electronic versions of the policies we can keep for a long time. There's no space considerations. The older policies, while we have a record of the form numbers and et cetera, over time sometimes those are gone, and so it's not uncommon that a life policy, because you can hold on to those for 30, 40 years, that we wouldn't have a copy of the policy, though we have a record of approving it.
Okay, some of them are 100 years.
Yeah, it's possible. Most of the time, most companies will stop those older policies.
So the
become
burden's
stale.
on the life company or the burden's on the department?
The department should have a record as long as it is required to keep the record. I believe it's 10 years, but again, I'll get back with you on the specific on that. But the company should have a copy of any enforced policy. The company ought to have an exemplar, and it ought to reflect the form number, which we should have a record of.
Okay, good. If you'll get.
Thing,
Okay.
Would you comment on the funeral directors' concern about verification?
I think there should be I think it makes sense that there would be a mechanism in place to efficiently understand whether or not there are benefits available, to the extent that the funeral home directors, providing any type of consultation where that would be relevant. It would seem appropriate. I don't know all the things necessarily to be, there's confidentiality, other provisions that may pop into that type of disclosure situation, but as a principle, it seems to me that efficient notification of benefits, if they're available, I can't think of anything that would be problematic in that, but that's just me speaking out of turn here.
I would assume that the funeral directors have an assignment of benefits before they start contacting insurance company. Is that how y'all do it? So I was just curious.
If there's an assignment, then you have the insurance company there's no reason they wouldn't be able to deal with you, and then it becomes, they should treat you as if you were the policyholder. Essentially, you've been assigned the benefits, and so verifying benefits is something that insurers are supposed to do when asked by someone who has a right to that contract.
Thank you, Representative Hughley for bringing that point up. But yes, that's true. We do have an assignment, but oftentimes the insurance companies want to deal solely with the beneficiary. And basically, all we're trying to do is just verify if the funeral is $10,000. Is there enough money on this policy to cover the expenses of the funeral? Who's the beneficiary, so we can make sure we have the correct family member completing the documents. And oftentimes it takes, as she mentioned, 5-7 days just to get that information verified. And most times families are wanting to have a Saturday funeral and it's already Thursday. And, you know, we need to make sure that we're going to get paid before we move forward on this funeral. So, and basically all we were just wanting to have a chance to, from the funeral side, to, as this discussion moves forward, as this bill moves forward, that there is some discussion about the funeral industry's concerns about verification of policies.
Anybody else? Maybe a good idea to have Greg Hawkins come over here and meet with us in the next meeting. Can you do that?
I'll let Greg know. I'm sure he'll enjoy the invite.
We need to invite him. So, all right, thank you for being here. Stacy, you want to say anything? Okay, I saw you hiding back there. Henry? Henry. Terry, you want to say anything? Okay. All right, what we're going to probably do the next meeting is extend the testimony. We haven't really heard from the life insurance companies. I think I asked at the last meeting that the life companies be present. I was told that there wasn't enough time. I don't know how much time they need, but I think it's been over a month since we had the last meeting. So, Terry, Stacy, can y'all get the carriers here? Bobby Potter couldn't be here, and I think he's going to have some companies here. Emily Bagwell couldn't be here either. So, anybody else? Okay. All right. The next meeting we'll have testimony from the life companies telling us their problems with the bill. If there are any problems, maybe they will be in agreement. Maybe they won't. Also in your package, the chairman, Richard Smith, had wanted us to, I don't know if we'll have time at the next meeting to talk about House Bill 306, 484, and 610. It's in your package. If y'all will take them with you. If we have time next meeting, we can talk about them. I think one of the bill numbers we can combine into this if we needed to. I think we can. So we'll let Ms. Witten know that if she can let us know. I'll try to set the meeting around the same time. Let me see if we can work it out where all of us can be here. Anybody else want to say anything before we end? Okay.
Do we have a date in mind?
I hadn't looked yet, so when are you going to be gone? Aren't you going to be gone? 19th for how long? 2 weeks, okay. We'll try to work around that. Remind me of it, if you will. Okay, no further business. We stand adjourned, and we thank you for being here today.